Hey everybody, this is Jazzmyn Banks. I'm a New York City filmmaker, and one of the things I love about the city is it's so easy to get around and go do what you need to do, especially for everybody who walks. Not as much for those who use a wheelchair like myself. Now, getting around in the wheelchair out and about town, that's fine. It's when you need to go somewhere via public transportation that it can get a little tricky. Now, I do drive, so I have that option, but parking is a pain in the butt, and sometimes it's you just don't have the time to go looking for a parking spot. Maybe you're on a long shoot and you don't really have the energy to deal with driving and parking on top of everything else. So the other day we had to go to a location to start setting it up for an upcoming web series that I'm directing. And it was in Brooklyn, I'm in Manhattan, and I decided, I want to see how to use public transportation in Manhattan. I've used the buses within Manhattan. Going to Brooklyn or Queens can get a little tricky because the bus drivers are not always good about hooking the wheelchair in, so it's a little unsafe. So in those instances, I tend not to go on my own. The other thing is you never know, if you're not familiar with the other end, what you're going to encounter and can you get back home, because in some cases it may take one bus to get where you're going and it might take 4 buses to get back, and sometimes they change the schedule, and if you're in a wheelchair and it's not easy for you to get home because of that, you might get stranded in a place all by yourself. So I always try to think ahead with how I'm going to approach these things. That's why most often I would usually drive. Now the city added a whole slew, about 400 wheelchair accessible taxi cabs a few years back, and they had this great program through 311 where you could call and you could say, hey, I'm on such and such and such and such, can you send the nearest taxi cab? Then they decided that it was too expensive to have this program and that everybody in a wheelchair can just wait in the street like everybody else, no biggie. Forget about the fact that you can't quickly hop out of the street or step sideways or any of that stuff that walking people can do to get out of the way of an oncoming car that really isn't paying attention. So recently they brought back the program, thank God, and on top of it there are 2 apps that assist you in getting a wheelchair accessible taxi cab to come and get you. One of them is the WOW Taxi app, WOW. Now this is a great app because you can book your taxi cab. They are going to send you a wheelchair accessible one, no problem. They'll bring you into Brooklyn, which is where I needed to go the other day. Yay, this is good. However, the downside of it is they will not go pick you up in Brooklyn and bring you back. So you can go there, but you cannot come back home. It's like a roach motel. I'm not saying that about Brooklyn because I love Brooklyn. The point is, you can go one way, but not the other way. And this is a huge problem because not everyone can just hop on a subway or a bus and get back. So the other alternative is the Halo app, H-A-I-L-O. That one's great because it services every place. However, because there always is a downside to things in life, it's dependent on how many taxi cabs that are wheelchair accessible happen to be in the area near enough to you at that time. So you have to keep, resending the request and resending the request. It's not the end of the world, but it feels like it when you get caught into little nightmares like we did the other night, where we couldn't get a taxi cab to come back home. So we called the MTA and said, okay, we want to try a subway and a bus, whatever combo works, to get us back here as soon as possible. So we were advised what New York City subways coming from Brooklyn to Manhattan had elevators at both ends so that I could actually get to the subway. And we took the bus to get there, only to find out there were no elevators there at all. Lots of steps up, but no elevators. So this left us at the mercy of our own defenses, but thankfully when we went into a pizzeria and we were trying to call local taxi cabs who were trying to charge us $200 and high absorbent prices like that, even though it only takes you about $35 to get there in the first place, some good Samaritans suddenly, just dove into action, and a whole bunch of people eating pizza sat there and picked up their cell phones and started dialing people that they knew that worked for taxi services, and suddenly next thing we had a regular minivan that came and picked us up. I was with two of my producers, and they, Army guys, and so they could pick the chair up and they could put it in the back of the minivan. They could put me in there, and since I had no idea who this guy was coming in the minivan to pick us up, I felt safe and secure, and we got back to Manhattan. It turns out he was with a regular taxi service. I got his card because he charged an awesome price of only $35 compared to $130 that the other ones were trying to get away with. So I guess one of the biggest pieces of advice I would ever give anyone in a wheelchair when they're trying to get around the tri-state area or the New York area is even though you think you're asking a very clear question of, I don't know, for example, which locations, which subway stops have an elevator that are, which are accessible. It's amazing. I don't know what happens, why you're being told that there's an elevator when there's not. I don't know if the map is incorrect. I don't know if the person just doesn't care and they don't understand the situation they're putting you in, because had I been alone, that would have been a very dangerous situation for me to be in, because my chair was running low on battery. I just wouldn't have been able to get home. My cell phone battery was running out because we had been there all day. So I think that the people who are giving you the advice that should know better really don't think about the consequences that they're possibly putting you in. So I would say your first runs on anything should be with someone that could help you. And definitely test it out, find out what are the places that you go, what are the reliable elevators at the subway. Subways, it's a bit of a crapshoot, unfortunately, because if the only way to get to that subway is the elevator, this alone is a huge problem, because it's too often that you hear about elevators not working. The buses, the big problem with them really is the drivers. It's more often I encounter drivers not wanting to strap the chair in, not wanting to put the seatbelt on you. Legally, they are obligated to. Now, granted, there are wheelchair users that feel that they don't need them to do that. I think they should at least allow them to strap the chair in, because it makes it difficult for the next person who does need that. I know in my case, my chair tends to move all over the place. It depends on what type of wheels you have, the weight of the chair, the style of the chair. It doesn't matter if it's a power chair like mine that locks and then all of a sudden it can't move anywhere. It's still going to slide on that surface. And even when they stop short, this can be a danger to you and a liability to the bus driver and the bus company. So it is something that you have to put your foot down on and just make them lock you in. Even if you don't feel you need your chair locked in, it actually helps other people in wheelchairs to have the drivers cooperate with them. Because I've had drivers outright refuse to lock my wheelchair in, and I actually did get injured once as a result of it. So that's the only downside, in my opinion, about the bus, is that most of the drivers are not taking their job seriously when it comes to the passengers who are in a wheelchair. They are more concerned about making their schedule on time, and I feel that the safety of the passenger should trump that. That's just me. And if they know the equipment, they care about the equipment, they're reporting if it's damaged, they'll be quick and efficient, because I've seen the ones that are on the ball, they're not holding up the schedule. You get in there, they lock you in, they get back in, they start driving. Then when it comes to the taxi cabs, the thing that's improved the quality of the taxi cab drivers is if you use that app. It makes all the difference in the world, because you are rating the drivers. So it's very different when you hail a cab on the street and they pick you up and they put you in there. They're the ones still that are trying to get away with not hooking you in. Oh, don't worry, I'll drive slowly, I'll drive carefully. I'm like, can you guarantee me everyone else is going to drive carefully? It's not even the point if you drive slow, if you drive careful. There are still other things that can go wrong if someone is not strapped in. So if you go through the app or 311, if you don't have an app, because you can call 311 and they'll put you on the phone with the service, there's a rating system, and that driver knows it, and they're going to make sure they're a lot more responsible to their passengers and to their job. So that's my big update about being in a wheelchair, getting around New York City, and the fun of it.